This is On Air with Oscar.
Well, thank you so much for joining us. Welcome to your weekly current affairs program. We call this On Air with Oscar. Remember, we are on every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday from 7 p.m. to 8 p.m. It's a program which unravels all those issues you hear and talk about each and every day. Now, today we want to talk about a subject which most of you usually ignore. I'm talking about issues dealing with people living with disabilities. A lot of people out there don't take care of this important group in our society, and on this platform we want to unravel this issue and see it from the various dimensions. In the studio, I've invited a disability activist. His name is Mr. Marko, otherwise known as Irie Vibes. Thank you so much for joining us on air.
Thank you very much, Oscar. Thank you very much, the people of Zimbabwe.
Now, take me through, how is the life of people living with disabilities?
The lives of people living with disabilities is very, very difficult. Society has decided to forget them deliberately or not deliberately, because in some instances society needs to be educated on the disability issue.
And you know what, when I look at the challenges people living with disabilities are facing, a lot of people seem not to understand the challenges. What are some of these challenges?
Some of these challenges are as follows. I would start with the most basic, being water. In all these years, people living with disabilities fail to access safe and clean water in most cases. Why? Because water is now being drawn from boreholes. So you will find out that how can someone on crashes go and fetch water on a borehole? How can someone who is blind go and fetch water from a borehole? So this is why I've stated the first one: water, access to safe and clean water. You go to cities like Harare and Chitungwiza, where there is no tap water. People rely on what? On the boreholes. So it therefore means, what are we saying to the disability community? They cannot go there. So it therefore means this is why you find them shabby.
Now, if
they cannot get.
So how do they do it if they cannot fetch water from a borehole? What is the best remedy for this?
The best remedy for this here is we need to have funds. We need the financial support to drill a borehole on the home or on a home of a person living with a disability. We will drill a commercial borehole. When we drill a commercial borehole, we will then locate 30 other people living with disabilities within the proximity of that borehole. And then we will then get the 1,000-liter tanks, which we will place 30 of them on the homes of these other people living with disabilities. And when we do so, it therefore means when we get water, we will then we will then supply these 30 individuals, so they can be supplied once or twice a month. So we would have solved the problem. And when we do this here, we are saying we need a pilot project which we will oversee, and we then have a model, and then that model that we would have created is then replicated to all the other cities and towns, constituencies, and so forth.
Now,
therefore means we have solved the water issue.
But according to you, Zimbabweans in particular, why do you think they've somehow negative perception towards people living with disabilities? Why do you think they do not respond to the challenges being faced by people living with disabilities? What could be the problem?
This issue here runs back to, I would say, centuries, if not millennia back. Our society, from those times, when a disabled child was born, the policy was the child should be killed because the child was a problem to society. This existed for time immemorial until in recent years when there was acceptance of people living with with disabilities. So this is the main reason why people shun people living with disabilities. They think it's taboo. Maybe they think it's something associated with witchcraft and so forth and so forth. So it therefore means this then brings negative perceptions, negative thinking whenever they see people living with disabilities. So this here is societal.
It's societal.
Yes.
Let me move on to the government a step further. Is the government supporting people living with disabilities? Would you say they're doing well?
I would say no, because the government should live by example, by taking due care for people living with disabilities. You see, in Zimbabwe, I think it's the only country in the world where you see people living with disabilities in the middle of a street begging for what? Begging for money, begging for food. A blind person in the middle of a street. I call that white line beggars, because they are found on the white line in a dangerous street. It's said. Someone on a wheelchair, you see someone on a wheelchair in the middle of a road with the dangerous trucks. What about if one reckless one comes, pushes them? That's disaster.
What gives them the power, the tenacity to go on the white line? If you're living, it's poverty.
Poverty. You know, there is a stinking poverty within people living with disabilities. Oscar and the nation, if you are failing to feed yourselves, you go to work, you cannot feed yourself. These people, 95% of people living with disabilities are not employed. They survive on the mercy of well-wishers. And if a well-wisher does not come, it therefore means that is imminent death When you say the government should be providing unemployment benefit for these people. Not even a single cent is paid to people living with disabilities. How then do you expect them to live and survive?
And how is
Which forests are people living with disabilities going to get wild fruits or to get maybe the animals so that they have a relish to support and survive? Where?
So, even if you look at the representation in Parliament and the Senate, would you say it's very opportune representation?
That's a laughing matter. Representation in the present day Parliament is not equitable. That representation is a circus, whereby the government of Zimbabwe, which has got 360 members of parliament and senators, would say that people living with disabilities should be represented by two people.
So you're saying there are two people in both parliament and senate?
They are all senators. We have got Honorable Senator Joe and Honorable Senator Shiri. Two people. And we then say 10% of the population has got a disability in one way or the other. So it therefore means that these two people are being required to represent 1,700,000 disabled persons.
This is On Air with Oscar. Let's just take a short break. In the studio, we've got a disability activist, Mr. Irie Vibes.
This is On Air with Oscar.
Well, thank you for staying with us. If you're just joining us, this is On Air with Oscar. In the studio, we've got a disability activist, Mr. Marko Abraham, otherwise known as Irie Vibes. Just before the break, he was talking about the representation in Parliament.
Yes. The representation in Parliament is not equitable. I was saying we've got 360 members of Parliament and senators. So it therefore implies that if we are looking at the 10%, 36 of the seats should be reserved to people living with disabilities. That is according to the 10% that is agreeable with the Central Statistical Office. The census says so. Everyone knows about it. So we are saying for a start, we need 10 members of parliament, one representing each province, and 5 senators.
Would these ones be voted for, or it's by a quota representation kind of system?
That it should be by a quota representation. Yes, because we are saying we are not politicians. What we are talking is not politics. This is bread and butter issues for people living with disabilities. It's survival issues for people living with disabilities. People who were created in the image of God but are being denied a livelihood, are being denied survival.
You said government is not supporting you as expected. Let's move on to the churches. Are you receiving any support from these churches we have in Zimbabwe? What's your word to them in as far as disability issues are concerned?
churches, we come to you to beg your support. We come to beg from you. Even in the scriptures, Jesus Christ would come and heal the blind, the disabled. You know, it therefore means he was looking for the downtrodden people in our society, the disadvantaged in society, whereby he was looking at uplifting them in society, because these people were neglected and abandoned the same way that we are abandoned and neglected and abused today. So it therefore means churches come in here in this dimension. We need them to conscientize their congregates that there are people out there who are living in misery, who need their support. They need to comfort them. They need to feed them. They need to see their upkeep. How then do we do it? We are now appealing to all churches in Zimbabwe to contribute $1 towards that cause, so that the money is collected throughout the country will then be pooled in a disability national fund. The issues I'm talking about here, we've already communicated with our senator, our disability senator in parliament, Honorable Joe. He is aware of this. So our appeal to Zimbabwe and Zimbabweans is that let all congregates donate $1. Let there be a day that is what? That is set aside, so that all these monies can be collected to help and assist the disabled. We don't want disabled patients in the streets as beggars. We don't want disabled patients in the streets of Harare as petty vendors.
Now, I just wanted to ask, people living with disabilities, most of them face a number of challenges. How much is a wheelchair, just for interest's sake? Just before the recording, you highlighted that
maybe about $100 or so dollars.
And most of the people living with disabilities cannot afford.
They cannot afford. Why? Because if you have got a disability, you can go to school from kindergarten up to university and still fail to get the job. So it therefore means this is why 95% of them are unemployed.
Let's move on to the homes, the people at home now. We spoke about government, the church, now the people. What's your word to the people in as far as disability issues are concerned?
People out there, we encourage them to embrace people living with disabilities. I think I said earlier on that any individual that you see on Mother Earth is created in the image of God. So by shunning them, neglecting them, and doing all the wrongs they will be doing, it therefore means they will be doing it to someone in the image of God. So they would be doing something or things that are against God himself.
And our education at school, do you say it supports people living with disabilities, the current education system?
The current education system, it needs to be revamped. When we are talking about 1,700,000 people in a nation, These are a lot of people. I, for one, propose that the disability issue should be on the curriculum of students from kindergarten up to university. Why do I say so? That is when there would be 100% acceptance of people with disabilities in our society, because they would have gone through it at school and accepting it at school and living with people with disabilities. So it therefore means it will therefore become universally accepted after being incorporated as a subject in school.
When we return from the break, it will be time for our last segment. This is On Air. Please don't go anywhere.
This is On Air with Oscar.
Welcome back. This is now the last segment in the studio. We've got a disability activist, Mr. Marko Abraham, otherwise known as Irie Vibes. And how would you summarize this discussion? We spoke about a lot of issues, but a lot of people would also want to know some of the issues you've faced as an individual, also living with disability.
Okay. Thank you, Oscar. I just want to give a brief summary of who Irie Vibes, Marko Abraham, the disability activist, has walked. My journey, born 1969, 13 June. 2 years after, 1971, suffered poliomyelitis. From there on, I started crawling became my way of.
How old were you when you were
I was 2 years.
And you crawled for how many years?
3, 4, 5, up to 5 years. I think 3 years. And I never got an opportunity to get a wheelchair then. And then around 1975, 76, that is when the legendary Jairus Irie came to our rescue. He's a legend, he's a living hero for us. That is when I got 2 calipers and crutches, and I started walking on crutches. And then 1977, started my grade 1 Nija primary school, Highfield. 78, Mberis Tangenamo school, and Berry school in Zengeza. And then 79, that is when I was enrolled at Jairus Irie Center, Southerton, up to completion of my grade 7 in 1982. 1983, went to Zengeza 1 High School for secondary education up to 1986. And then from there, 1988 and 89, went to Rua Rehabilitation Center, where I did a bookkeeping and accounts course. From there, I then attained Pitman's advanced bookkeeping and accounts. Then, in 1990, was employed as a secondary school teacher at Zengeza 4 High School in Chitungwiza, Zengeza. I served there teaching principles of accounts, commerce, and mathematics. That was for 3 consecutive years. And then after that, I did take a short break. After leaving the education sector, there was no one who was willing to employ us, because in the workplace disabled persons are discriminated. Whether you have the qualification or not, discrimination is so rife. They categorize people living with disability as workplace liabilities. We are regarded as workplace liabilities. Yes.
Yes, and you know what? You're coming to something, to a point, how you started assisting people, especially. I remember you being at premise at the roundabout area there. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. So after that, I went to Harare Polytechnic. I'll come to that issue because I want to feel everything so that everyone knows my background. I then went to Harare Polytechnic, where I did higher education in purchasing and supply management. And at the same time, I did the second diploma with the Institute of Bankers of Zimbabwe. When I was at college, it all started when I was at college. 95, I was enrolled, 96, and then 97. I was involved in SRC activities, school representative school representative council activities. For no apparent reason, I was suspended by the principal and the Ministry of Higher Education. That's how it started. For voicing my concerns and other people's concerns for better education facilities, grants, and so forth and so forth. So I went to the High Court and I won my case. I was found not guilty. And up to today, I've not been what? I've not been compensated for the what? For the disturbance.
Okay, which disturbance? Be clear, people want to know.
No, being suspended and losing 1 year on your academic what? On your academic education is a big drawback. Yes, it needs to be compensated. Damages should be what? Should be paid.
It's unfortunate. We are left with 3 minutes, and I wouldn't want to rush you. But I want you to get to a certain point that we can end this part. Then we continue with the other segment. Right. Then we invite you again.
I revives being a disability activist. I did build a police station at the roundabout Mbudzi before the new flyover was built. And I donated a part of my premises to the state to use. And it was used as a police station from 2013 to 2023, which is a decade, whereby the social responsibility that I did to the nation helped the people for 10 continuous years.
So you want to be paid? I'm just being precise. You want to be paid, isn't it?
No.
Are you saying you want to be compensated?
You know, everyone who was at the Mbudzi People's Market who was disturbed was compensated. So, in my regard, I had built a temporary structure to what? To house the police and ourselves. When we say temporary, it means it was not something that was what? That was permanent. But I believe the state and the people of Zimbabwe should be reasonable and understanding that this individual here brought tangible development to the people and the area. The whole development that cascaded around that was because we had what? We had put law and order for everything to what? To move on well. So, in terms of compensation, a reasonable token of appreciation should have been what?
You said others were given. And you were not given?
Yes, we were not given because they then categorized our structures as illegal. Yet they were temporary structures doing national work. So, if I may ask, if they say we were illegal, does it mean that all the police activities which emanated from there to the Magistrate Court, to the High Court, to the Supreme Court, and to the Constitutional Court, all those were illegal activities?
This is On Air with Oscar. This is part one. We have to end it here. You know, when it gets exciting, we normally reach such levels. But I'll give you an opportunity to give us your parting words as we conclude part one of this discussion.
My parting words is, if the government of Zimbabwe see that we don't deserve a token of appreciation, we then go to the people of Zimbabwe, the nationals of Zimbabwe, whereby we are now appealing for financial assistance so that we start all over again. And when we start all over again, our mandate is now to help people living with disabilities in Zimbabwe.
Disability activist Mr. Marko Abraham, thank you so much for coming through. And I know this is just but the first episode. We shall be talking to him more often on air, as well as other people living with disability. Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you, Oscar. Thank you, Zimbabwe.
On behalf of the executive producer, Tonderai Chiza, myself, Oscar, please continue to watch On Air with Oscar.